When you imagine a leader, what do you see? A golden office, a long table, a man surrounded by bodyguards and decisions made from a distance? Or do you imagine something different? A leader sitting cross-legged on the floor of a small home, sharing a bowl of food with a family that struggles to afford even one proper meal? Most leaders choose comfort. But Ibrahim Traoré made a choice that shocked even his closest advisors. He walked away from the palace and stepped directly into the daily pain, hope, and hunger of ordinary people. Because for him, leadership isn't about watching his people from above. It's about living among them, feeling what they feel, and carrying their struggles on his own shoulders. This is the story of a leader who chose the harder path, the human path, the path of sacrifice. Leadership is often measured by distance, how far above the people a leader stands, how high his position rises, how tightly he guards his comfort and power. In many nations, leaders live behind walls so tall that they can no longer hear the voices of the people who placed them there. They speak of poverty without ever feeling hunger. They talk of struggle without ever touching hardship. They promise change without truly understanding what needs to be changed. But every once in a lifetime, someone breaks this pattern. Someone steps down from the throne and chooses the ground. Someone decides that a title means nothing if it keeps you separated from the truth. Ibrahim Traoré is one of those rare leaders. The story you are about to witness is not about politics. It is not about power, uniforms, or speeches. It is about a young man who looked at the suffering around him and said, "I cannot lead these people unless I live like them." In a world where leaders often chase privilege, Traoré did the opposite. He gave it up. Instead of living in a house guarded by walls and soldiers, he walked into neighborhoods where the roofs leaked when it rained, where children slept to the sound of gunfire in the distance, where mothers prayed their small bags of grain would last one more day. He chose to breathe the same dusty air. He chose to feel the same heat that kept families awake at night. He chose to carry the same burdens the poor carried every day. But why? Why would a leader deliberately step into discomfort, danger, and struggle? Because Traoré understood something most leaders forget. You cannot heal a nation whose pain you refuse to touch. And so he touched it. Not with gloves, but with open hands. He listened to the elderly farmers whose crops were dying. He walked with young men searching for work they might never find. He sat beside widows who repeated the same heartbreaking story. "My husband died protecting a country that no one protected for him." Every story changed him. Every tear strengthened him. Every shared meal connected him. He became not just a leader, but a witness. Not just a commander, but a companion. Not just a president, but a brother walking among his own people. In this introduction, we explore the profound personal sacrifices that shaped his journey. We uncover how living among the people did not just change his leadership. It changed the relationship between a nation and the man guiding it. This is the beginning of a story about courage, empathy, and sacrifice. A story that proves that true leadership is not built on privilege, but on presence. Power is a strange thing. It tempts. It blinds. It isolates. For most leaders, the moment they step into high office, they are lifted away from the world they once knew. Their feet no longer touch the same ground. Their hands no longer carry the same weight. People are kept at a distance. Reality becomes something reported to them, never experienced by them. But Ibrahim Traoré refused to fall into that trap. The night everything changed was quiet, almost too quiet. The city around him slept under a sky heavy with dust and starlight. In the presidential residence, guards patrolled their usual routes, convinced their leader was safe behind concrete walls and thick glass. But Traoré stood at a window, staring out into the darkness, feeling more like a prisoner than a president. How could he lead a nation if he didn't understand how that nation survived every sunrise? The decision came not from anger, nor from impulse, but from a deep ache in his chest, an ache created by the distance between him and the people he vowed to protect. He had heard their struggles through reports, but their pain felt diluted, filtered, almost unreal. Something inside him whispered, "Go to them, stand where they stand, see what they see." So he made a choice few leaders in human history have dared to make. He stepped out of the world of power and into the world of the people. He left behind the polished floors, the air-conditioned rooms, and the perfect plates of food. He left behind the heavily guarded gate that kept the world out and kept him in. He left behind comfort itself. With only a small escort, barely noticeable, intentionally hidden, he walked through streets that were never meant for a president's feet. Streets where children still played with makeshift footballs, where market women counted coins like treasure, where old men leaned on canes that had seen too many years. The first neighborhood he visited was one he had seen only from the windows of a car. But walking into it at night was different. There were no prepared speeches, no waiting crowds, no cameras ready to capture a staged moment. There was only the raw pulse of life, real, unfiltered, honest. A faint light flickered from a small clay house. Inside, a mother sat with her 3 children, dividing a pot of porridge that looked too thin to fill anyone's stomach. Their laughter was soft, tired, but real. Traoré stood at the doorway for a moment, unsure if he should interrupt. But when the mother saw him, she didn't recognize him as the president, only as a young man who looked lost in his own thoughts. "Come," she said gently, as if inviting an old friend. "You look hungry." It was the first time in months that someone spoke to him without fear, without formality, without calculation. It was the first time someone didn't call him Mr. President. They simply saw a man. He sat on the floor with them, cross-legged, and ate from the same bowl. No golden plates, no luxurious dining room, just a shared meal. Small, humble, but filled with warmth. And in that moment, he realized something powerful. He had learned more about his country in 10 minutes here than in 10 months of official meetings. From that night forward, Traoré made it a routine. He visited neighborhoods at dawn, when women carried buckets to fetch water. He walked through markets at noon, blending into crowds that moved like rivers. He sat with farmers at dusk, their hands cracked from years of fighting dry soil. He walked through villages where the night felt heavier because electricity was a luxury instead of a right. At first, people didn't believe he was real. Some stared in shock. Some whispered in disbelief. Others cried, not because a president stood before them, but because someone finally cared enough to see their suffering with his own eyes. One evening, he walked into a courtyard where elderly men gathered to drink tea. The oldest among them, a man with trembling hands and eyes full of forgotten stories, stood up slowly and placed a hand on Traoré's shoulder. "My son," he said in a voice that cracked with age. "No leader has ever sat with us. They only send promises. But you came yourself." Those words burned into Traoré's heart. He was not there to collect praise. He was there to collect truth. He listened to hundreds of people, mothers who feared losing their children to hunger, young men who dreamed of a future but felt trapped in the present, teachers who taught in classrooms without walls or books, soldiers who protected the nation yet lacked boots that fit their feet. Every story changed him a little more. Every night he returned home heavy, not with exhaustion, but with the weight of responsibility. His advisors panicked. His security team pleaded. "You are putting yourself in danger," they warned. "You are risking your life." But he answered with a calmness that silenced them all. "I cannot ask my people to live through dangers I myself refuse to face." For Traoré, leadership was not a title. It was not a ceremony. It was not a chair in a high office. Leadership was presence. Presence in pain, presence in struggle, presence in reality. By stepping out of power and into the people's world, he broke the invisible wall that separates leaders from citizens. He made himself vulnerable, reachable, human. He became a leader who didn't observe hardship from afar. He walked into it. He breathed it. He lived it. And because of that, the people didn't just trust him. They felt seen by him. They felt protected by him. They felt proud of him. His sacrifice was not measured by what he gained, but by what he was willing to lose. Comfort, safety, privilege, distance. He gave all of that up, so he could stand not above his people, but among them. Living among the people was not a staged experience for Traoré. It was real life, raw, unfiltered, and often uncomfortable. Every day was a lesson, every interaction a mirror reflecting the struggles he had once only read about in reports. Morning would break with the heat of a sun that spared no one. Traoré would rise before dawn, walking alongside mothers carrying heavy water jugs on their heads, their footsteps echoing the weight of generations. He carried his own share, muscles straining as if to understand the physical burden they bore daily. There was no glory in this work, no applause, only the rhythm of life itself. Breakfast was seldom more than a shared bowl of millet porridge, sometimes flavored with a small piece of dried fish or a few grains of sugar. He ate what they ate, no special meals, no assistance. He learned quickly that a full stomach was a privilege many could only dream of, and hunger could sharpen every moment into a lesson of endurance. The streets were not paved in marble. They were dusty, cracked, and lined with homes that seemed fragile against the sky. Children ran barefoot, their laughter and cries mingling with the sounds of animals and distant traffic. Traoré walked among them, sometimes helping carry their bundles or offering words of encouragement. He saw the fatigue in their eyes, the resilience in their smiles, and the courage in their small steps toward an uncertain future. Markets were another awakening. Vendors called out, counting coins with care, measuring every portion, bargaining over prices that seemed almost too small to matter. Traoré would help lift sacks of grain or carry baskets of vegetables, understanding for the first time the exhaustion behind every transaction. He felt the sting of heat and the ache of muscle fatigue as clearly as they did, learning humility in every moment. Evenings brought conversations he would never forget. Families would invite him to sit beside them, to listen to stories of survival, of love lost and hope preserved. He sat on the floor, legs crossed, hands dirty from shared work or dust. He listened as mothers spoke of children they struggled to feed. He heard fathers confess the frustration of failing to provide. And he felt the quiet dignity of people who had endured hardship for decades, who had lived with courage no report could ever capture. Through this daily immersion, Traoré learned that leadership was not about issuing orders or sitting in committees. It was about walking beside people in the smallest, hardest, and most ordinary moments of their lives. Every day spent in their world deepened his empathy, strengthened his resolve, and reminded him that true understanding comes from shared experience, not distance. By living the daily lives of ordinary citizens, Traoré bridged the invisible gap between leader and led. He was no longer a distant figure. He became part of the rhythm of the people's lives, their struggles, and their hope. And it was in this quiet, relentless presence that the heart of his leadership began to beat, stronger, wiser, and infinitely more human. Traoré's decision to live among the people was not merely symbolic. It was transformative. It was in the quiet, unscripted encounters with real individuals that he began to understand the heartbeat of his nation. Each face told a story, each word carried a lifetime of struggle, and every tear left an imprint on his soul. One of the first encounters that changed him occurred in a small, sun-baked village at the edge of a parched field. An elderly farmer named Musa was trying to tend his dying crops. The soil had cracked under the relentless sun, and his hands, hardened by decades of toil, trembled as he struggled to lift a hoe. Traoré knelt beside him, mimicking the farmer's movements, feeling the blistering sun on his own back. "You are not like the others," Musa said, his voice quiet but piercing. "They send promises. They send papers. But you are here." The words struck Traoré deeper than any speech ever could. He realized that people didn't want words. They wanted presence. They wanted someone who would sit in the dust with them, who would share their sweat, who would see their lives not as statistics but as sacred human stories. Children left school early to work in the streets or fields, their eyes reflecting both fatigue and resilience. Traoré found a little girl named Amina cleaning car windows at a busy intersection. Her hands were raw from broken glass, her clothes thin against the cold. When he knelt to speak with her, she looked up, startled, unsure if he was a passerby or something more. "Why are you here?" she asked, her small voice trembling. "Because I need to understand," he replied softly. "I need to know what life feels like for you." And in that moment, she hesitated, then smiled. A fragile, honest smile that carried the weight of hope. Traore spent the afternoon with her, carrying water, helping sweep the street, and sharing a small loaf of bread. That single day became a lifetime lesson. Leadership meant empathy, it meant action, it meant being willing to step into someone else's pain. Even in the bustling markets, he found profound lessons in humanity. A mother named Fatty struggled to sell vegetables to feed her children. Her hands shook as she weighed each tomato, counting coins like they were gold. Traore offered no grand gesture, no political favor. He simply helped her lift baskets, carried water for her stall, and shared a quiet conversation about survival. In the evenings, he would sit in the homes of widows who lived alone, listening to stories of lost husbands, lost children, and unfulfilled dreams. One widow, Miriam, shared her fear of nights alone, the shadows that whispered dangers only she could hear. Traore listened, sometimes holding her hands, sometimes sitting silently. In those moments, he realized that leadership was not about policy alone. It was about bearing witness, about standing in solidarity with those whose lives were marked by pain and resilience. Soldiers, too, were part of his encounters. He visited young recruits training under harsh conditions, tired and hungry, yet determined. He shared meals with them, listened to their fears of battle and loss, and spoke of duty not as a command, but as a shared commitment. He began to understand the sacrifices they made daily, the sacrifices often invisible to the world above. Every encounter, every story, every touch of a hand or shared meal deepened Traore's connection to his people. He carried their pain home each night, reflecting on their struggles, letting them shape his decisions, his heart, and his soul. It was not without risk. Many warned him that walking among ordinary citizens could make him vulnerable. But he understood that true leadership required vulnerability, the courage to feel the suffering of others as if it were your own. Only then could he act with genuine justice, compassion, and vision. Through these emotional encounters, Traore transformed not just his understanding of the nation, but the nation's understanding of him. No longer a distant figure, he became a living part of the community, a leader whose presence meant more than any speech or decree. People began to call him not president or sir, but simply brother, a testament to the trust and love he had earned. These moments were more than interactions. They were lessons in humanity, sacrifice, and empathy. They proved that leadership is measured not in power, but in presence. Not in titles, but in the courage to live among the people, to share their struggles, and to carry their burdens alongside them. And it is through these emotional encounters with real people that Traore learned the most important truth of all. To lead a nation, one must first walk its streets, touch its hands, and feel its heart. Traore's decision to live among the people was revolutionary, but it was also dangerous. Not everyone understood it, and not everyone agreed. Behind the scenes, in the shadowed halls of power, murmurs grew louder. Advisors whispered in worried tones. Security officers raised alarms. Even some colleagues questioned whether his compassion could endanger the very nation he sought to protect. "You cannot walk the streets like this," one senior advisor warned, his voice heavy with concern. "You are putting yourself at risk. You are exposing yourself to violence, disease, and even betrayal. A leader must be careful. Safety is not negotiable." Traore listened quietly, the soft glow of lamplight reflecting off his thoughtful eyes. He did not dismiss their concerns lightly. He understood the risks better than anyone. But he also understood something they had long forgotten. Leadership was more than power, it was presence. And the presence of a leader, distant and untouched, could never heal a nation. Another day, the head of his security detail spoke sharply, frustration lining his face. "Sir, if word spreads that you are moving through the neighborhoods without proper protection, there will be chaos. People may even exploit your kindness. It is reckless." Traore looked at him calmly, his voice firm yet gentle. "If I demand courage from the people, I must show it first. If I ask them to endure, I cannot hide from what they endure." The warnings continued, growing in urgency. Friends, advisors, even family members urged him to reconsider. You are risking everything. Your life, your mission, your ability to lead, they said. This is not the way. But Traoré had already made his decision. He knew that leadership was not about isolation, about safety, about walking a clean and risk-free path. Leadership meant standing in the fire alongside your people, feeling their pain, sharing their fears, and absorbing the weight of their struggles. And so he continued. He walked through crowded markets while advisors begged him to stay in the car. He sat in homes where families lived in fear, ignoring calls from security that danger might be near. He carried water for children, shared meals with mothers, and slept under the open sky when their homes could not accommodate him. Every warning only strengthened his resolve. Every caution reminded him why he had chosen this path in the first place. But it was not only fear for his personal safety. Some political opponents saw his actions as naive or even threatening. A man who walks among the people can lose control, they whispered. He may expose secrets, be vulnerable to manipulation, or appear weak. Yet Traoré's response was unwavering. Power without understanding is hollow. Safety without empathy is meaningless. And control without compassion is tyranny. He said, words that would echo in the hearts of those who truly saw him. Even ordinary citizens were initially skeptical. At first, they wondered if his presence was genuine or a political stunt. Is he really here? A mother asked, her voice trembling as her children huddled close. Or is this just for the cameras? But over time, as he returned day after day, lifting baskets, carrying water, and sharing in their hardships without expectation, their skepticism faded. They realized he was not there for spectacle. He was there because he believed in the power of shared humanity. Every warning, every doubt, every voice of caution could have stopped him. Most leaders would have listened, retreated to safety, and preserved their comfort. But Traoré saw that true leadership demanded courage, not just in the battlefield or in politics, but in the everyday act of standing with people who had no protection, no safety, and no voice. The reactions and warnings he faced were immense. They could have broken a lesser man. But for Traoré, they were proof of the depth of the gap he sought to bridge. They were reminders that walking among the people was not safe, but it was necessary. And in facing these dangers head-on, he became more than a leader. He became a living example of what it meant to serve, sacrifice, and endure for the greater good. Because in the end, Traoré understood a truth that few ever grasp. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. And leadership is not the absence of risk, but the willingness to embrace it for the people you serve. Ibrahim Traoré's sacrifices were more than symbolic. They reshaped the very essence of his leadership. By stepping into the lives of ordinary citizens, he gained a perspective no report, no meeting, and no briefing could ever provide. He saw firsthand the struggles of mothers scraping to feed their children, of farmers battling failing crops, of children walking miles for water. Each encounter left a mark on his heart and informed every decision he made. Policies were no longer abstract directives. They became acts of empathy. Corruption was confronted not as a political game, but as a betrayal of real people whose lives hung in the balance. Resources were allocated with precision, programs were designed with compassion, and promises were kept because he understood the weight of broken trust. More than strategy, his presence instilled hope. The people no longer viewed him as a distant figure of authority. They saw him as one of them. A leader who carried their burdens, shared their struggles, and celebrated their resilience. Through sacrifice, Traoré discovered the true measure of leadership. It is not power, titles, or control. It is empathy, presence, and the courage to walk beside your people every step of the way. The sun had long set, but the streets were alive with quiet murmurs of life. Traoré stood in the center of a small village, the dust from the roads rising gently around him, settling on worn shoes and tired shoulders. He looked around at the people, faces etched with hardship, eyes shimmering with resilience, and a wave of realization swept over him. All the power, all the titles, all the pomp of leadership meant nothing if it did not touch the hearts of the people. The emotional weight of every story he had heard, every hand he had held, every burden he had carried alongside them culminated in this moment. It was clear. Leadership was not a distant act from a safe office. It was walking the dusty roads. It was lifting water for children who had none. It was sitting with widows who had been forgotten by the world. In that realization, Traoré felt both exhaustion and clarity. He had sacrificed comfort, security, and privilege, but in return, he had gained something far greater: the trust, love, and connection of a nation. His sacrifices had transformed him, not into a ruler above the people, but a brother among them, a guardian who understood their pain because he had felt it himself. The final message is simple yet profound. True leadership is measured not by power or titles, but by empathy, presence, and the courage to endure what others endure. A leader who walks among the people, listens to their stories, and shares in their struggles becomes more than a figurehead. They become a symbol of hope, courage, and humanity. And this is where you come in. Witnessing Traoré's journey reminds us that we all have a role in creating change, no matter how small. Share this story. Talk about it. Let it inspire your community. Because the world needs leaders who do not stand above the people, but beside them. And it needs people like you to carry the message forward. Stand with humanity. Stand with courage. Walk beside those who need it most. And never forget, presence is power, empathy is strength, and sacrifice is the true measure of leadership.